Welcome back to Privacy is Power, tips and tricks for data security compliance. I'm Stacy.
And I'm Caroline.
And for episode 3, we want to bring it back to the basics and talk about creating data privacy and security policies and implementing procedures. Organizations have two sets, internal and external. Your internal policies and procedures are used by your personnel to understand what data privacy and security policies are in place and how to implement them throughout various scenarios. Your external policies and procedures are used to set expectations for clients and consumers on what data privacy and security rules and regulatory requirements your organization satisfies, and used as a value driver to show the importance of data privacy and security matters within your organization.
Before drafting and implementing policies and procedures, your organization should understand the type of data that it accesses, uses, discloses, and maintains. This process is often referred to as data mapping because your organization will map out the type of data that it has, where the data comes from, and where the data goes. Once your organization completes the data mapping process, it will be easy to identify the types of policies and procedures that may be required or recommended. Some laws, like HIPAA, actually require written internal policies and procedures that also have specific privacy and security safeguards that must be accounted for. While it may seem like a daunting process to draft and implement policies and procedures, there are many beneficial aspects to going through the process. Policies and procedures can serve as a great checklist for identifying the privacy and security standards that apply to your organization, and can also help your organization identify any gaps in compliance as you go through the process of drafting and implementing. For example, under HIPAA, organizations are required to maintain a written policy and procedure relating to individual rights and individual access to data. In fact, the Department of Health and Human Services is extremely focused on this policy and procedure. As your organization drafts your policy for individual access to data, for example, and it implements a procedure for complying with that policy, your organization can determine whether it has historically had issues with compliance in that area, and can come up with an action plan for compliance going forward.
HIPAA and access policies and procedures is a great example, but there may be other U.S. federal, state, or international laws that require you to have certain policies and procedures in place. Once your organization performs its data mapping exercise, it's important to also add to that data map what regulatory requirements may apply to various categories on your map. One policy that all organizations should have is your privacy policy. Most importantly, organizations see this on your website or public facing, but it's important to note that privacy policies are both internal and external. They're used externally to show what personal information is collected, used, and shared within your organization, whether it's offline or online collected information. It can also be used to provide disclosures to comply with other regulatory requirements, whether the Children Online Privacy Protection Act, TCPA or CAN-SPAM under U.S. federal requirements, or state security laws like the New York SHIELD Act or international rules under GDPR, the General Data Protection Regulations in the EU. The privacy policy, however, can also be a great internal tool to help your personnel understand what information is collected, used, and shared, what the rules are with respect to sharing it externally, and what rules might apply to information that's other categories, not necessarily personal information, but maybe confidential or trade secret information of your organization, or employment data that's only kept internally. So it's important to understand what rules apply, both on an external and an internal level.
In this month's vlog, we also want to highlight some of the policies and procedures that regulatory agencies tend to focus on. Whether required or simply recommended, we hope that your organization can account for each of these policies and procedures. First and foremost is breach response. Your organization should have a step-by-step written policy and procedure for how your organization will investigate, respond to, and mitigate an actual breach or a suspected breach. As discussed in Privacy is Power Episode 1, breach response can be a very complex process, so having this procedure written out will be very helpful going forward. Another important policy and procedure is remote access. Remote access is extremely important in a world of COVID-19, where employees are oftentimes working remotely, either from home or even on vacation. A third important policy and procedure is encryption. Many employees, when they're sending sensitive data via email, either to coworkers internally or even to clients externally, forget to encrypt their emails. Having a written policy and procedure for the process of encrypting emails and having a place for employees to reference when they need to determine whether they have to encrypt the email at all is extremely important and even helpful. Finally, another important policy and procedure is individual rights and individual access, as mentioned previously. Many regulatory agencies are focused on an individual's access to their own data and control over their own data, so it's important for your organization to understand what requirements apply to you.
Those are great examples, and a few more, like a document retention policy. This may be legally required or just the best industry practice to have in place. The document retention policy should lay out what types of data your organization collects, what retention schedule applies, and various storage and destruction requirements with respect to both electronic and hard copy paper files. Other policies include your workforce monitoring or sanction policy to ensure that your personnel understand what rules apply and what those expectations are. Also, your continuity plan, your backup or your business continuity plan that's often part of your InfoSec broader data privacy and security policy, or could be a standalone policy to ensure that everyone understands what happens in those backup scenarios. One important policy and procedure to keep in mind is your vendor management policy. This is often thought of not in the context of data privacy and security policies and procedures, but data privacy and security is an important piece of a vendor management plan. You want to ensure that you're flowing down all data privacy and security requirements to your vendors and ensure they're complying with the important legal requirements. You may get asked to share your policies and procedures externally, whether with vendors, clients, consumers, or other public-facing methods. It's important to understand that when you share these policies and procedures, they could have sensitive information about the security requirements that your organization implements. And in order to share those, you should have the right data sharing agreement in place. You can refer back to episode 2 of Privacy is Power, where Caroline and I talk through data sharing agreements.
If your organization needs policies and procedures, or simply needs to update existing policies and procedures, please reach out to us today for assistance. The McGrath North Privacy and Cybersecurity team can walk you through each policy and procedure, whether required or recommended, and can help your organization identify any gaps in compliance. Thanks for watching Privacy is Power. We'll see you next week.